And when he was alive, he had this, bless him, a habit of bringing me plants. And every time I'm like, what, what in the world are you doing? And he would just be like, no, just wait a second. I have a story to tell you.
Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Book Therapy. I have a beautiful interview coming up next for you. But before we get to that, I just want to encourage you, if you are enjoying this podcast and if you find it helpful to your daily life and your whatever season God has you in right now, please pass it on to a friend. I know that recommendations from friends are going to be more powerful than a stranger online telling them to listen to a podcast. If you're enjoying it, thank you, and thank you for listening, and text it to a friend or screenshot it, or I don't know, you guys are smart. Share it however you want, and I would really appreciate it. Okay, on with the show. Let's dive into the book. Today we are talking about Even When, Experiencing God's Presence During Difficult Days. This is a 40-day devotional, and it is written by Sara Cormany. She is an award-winning writer and speaker, and she is a former speech educator, and her husband and their family live in Kansas City, Kansas. So I am happy to have Sara on the show with me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm just happy to be here.
You have been through a lot, Sara, and you talk in your book about your physical struggles. You talk about your family struggles and how God has grown you through these hard times. And like your subtitle says, experiencing God's presence during difficult days. I love that subtitle for you because I felt like as I was reading it, you were clinging to the things that God was teaching you on those difficult days. And I find that many of those things can relate with everyone because we need those small little truths to cling to on our hardest days. So, we're going to talk today about 3 character traits developed by suffering, which is a
So
blessed
fun.
word, right?
Party and a half.
The first character trait that we develop by suffering or that God develops in us through suffering, this is never going to be our first choice. But I like to say that suffering is often the first rung on the ladder towards empathy. And so our first character trait is empathy. And this is something that in our suffering, we think it's all about us. And then after our suffering, we see someone else and we realize the comfort that God gives us through our suffering is meant to comfort others. So on page 24, you're talking about going to the grocery store. You have had physical debilitation that makes a grocery store trip more than just a simple outing. You say, let me tell you, plastic bags, twist ties, and poor fine motor skills, surprisingly, they do not mix, especially when the corn bin's limited selection requires some searching and the fussy folks behind you do not want to wait. So, in your fumbling, you later are able to relate to someone else, like you said, the elderly driver desperately holding on to her freedom, or the 3-year-old who longs to be independent but struggles to get his shirt on most days. So, the grace that God gives you in your moments, you are then able to extend to other people. Can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. I think that that is a continual, almost like master class that we have as followers of Jesus. The longer we live, the more hard things we're going to go through. And we can either be embittered by them or we can really root into what is he teaching me about the people he loves through them. And the first really, I think, eye-opening moment for me was walking into my OT and PT room and they have everybody. It's a special center in the hospital that I go to, and there are burn victims that also do therapy in the room. And I was just all fussy pants and, like, "Ah, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to face this hard thing." But when you watch folks, and I don't think it's a competition, it's not a comparison game. It's just a recognition that, okay, there are things I can do. And even if it takes me a long time, even if it's hard to do, what it's going to open my eyes to are the people around me. So I've got to get my eyes off of my junk and put them on the people in front of me.
You talk about near the end of the book of a interaction with someone just through the drive-through. And one thing that you say on page 133 is, I could see past her tough cookie act a few days earlier and notice the effect of illness on her face because I see it in the mirror every day. That's why within seconds of looking at her, I had asked, "Are you okay?" And I was so proud of her responding, "Not really." How do we take care of each other when we see the pain in their eyes that we recognize in ourselves?
I think at first, again, it's that eyes up mentality, not down, eyes up, really taking the time to slow down and see people. Because I don't know about you, when I have a list or I have something that goal is so far in front of me that I'm going after. And especially before illness, I was one of those people. I'm not as graceful as I once was in executing the plan, but I I do think it requires that slowness, that kind of like what I talked about in the grocery store, that recognition that, okay, I may make a few people wait. I may have to make myself wait, but I need to, at minimum, see the hurt and the pain that I've experienced through my eyes and the eyes of other people. But again, it really does take that slowing down and recognition to be able then to speak life or speak love into someone else.
I think my favorite phrase from you on page 24 is, "I'm learning to live life in slow motion. Everything is deliberate, everything is measured, everything is carefully orchestrated, even when it appears to be a fumbling, blessed mess." Your illness forces you to slow down. What has that taught you about life, living life in slow motion?
Number one, we miss people. We miss people all the time, all the time. I miss people all the time. The second thing I think it does is we don't like to be still. There's a reason God instructs us to be still and know Him. But if we don't take the opportunity to stop, if we don't take the opportunity to slow down, and we live in a culture that does not like slow, but I think the way God intended for us to enter into relationship, and whether that's relationship with a person, a friend, a stranger, or with Him, we really do have to take the opportunity to just intentionally be still. And I think that's key.
Yeah, and it goes against our natural bend, which is to
Absolutely.
hustle. We're hustlers.
That's right.
The second thing that we can develop through suffering is an unconditional love for others. I love your story about your husband because he took care of. Is Mimi your, who is Mimi?
She's the one that I had around all through my growing up, all through my kids growing up. Well, until she passed away when my eldest was 9 years old. So,
Okay, so your grandmother, your husband took care of one night and you were home and he was late because he was taking care of her. He says, "I'm sorry I'm so late. I tucked her into bed, brushed her hair, put on her chapstick, got her into her fuzzy socks, rearranged her pillows and blankets, and got her ice water." And you remembered that those were the things that he did for you. helping you put on your socks and shoes, brushing your hair, applying chapstick in every hospital room you've ever been in, rearranging pillows and blankets, bringing you ice water or chocolate. And I thought that was really beautiful because we always need more examples of Christ serving. And when people serve physically in a way of, bringing ice water, or I mean, the Bible even says like giving water to someone who's thirsty is serving. And those are really tiny things. And honestly, they can be really annoying. Like, no, I don't want to get you water. No, I don't want to get your fuzzy socks. Like, you don't
Mhm.
really need fuzzy socks, do you? But those are ways that we can serve each other. So his unconditional love when you were sick really showed you a picture of Christ. And then also your dad giving you flowers. Tell me about that. That was a really beautiful story.
So my daddy loved plants and loved to garden. And I think a lot of it is he was a physician for many years. And I think that kind of bringing things back to life, a lot of times he would pick the saddest little plant you ever did see. And when he was alive, he had this, bless him, a habit of bringing me plants. And every time I'm like, what, what in the world are you doing? And he would just be like, no, just wait a second. I have a story to tell you. So this was actually the devotion that you're mentioning. It actually happened on Mother's Day, which is coming up. So I guess it's kind of appropriate. And my eldest, I think it was my very first one. So he shows up on my doorstep with his daffodil. I'm like, Dad, please, Daddy. He's like, no, no, I will plant it. And every year, I promise it's going to come back and you won't have to do anything. And I'm like, likely story. So he went to work, and for every year, he would come to watch my kids during hard seasons. And he always made sure that all the plants were watered, including the daffodils. But it wasn't until he passed away in 2014 unexpectedly from a brain aneurysm that I really knew what a gift that was and what a legacy he was leaving in our lives. Because the very first, probably, I don't think it was Mother's Day, it would have been just the summer that he was gone. I totally forgotten about him. And I was walking around the yard doing something I don't even know. And I saw like the little green shoots of something. And I'm like, oh no, the daffodils. I've killed my dad's flowers. And when you're grieving, you're just like sobbing. And so I go run, look, and check. And there they were. And the flowers had bloomed. And it was just in time for my birthday, which of course felt like this sweet little hug from heaven until I realized they weren't for me. They were for my mom because my birthday is also their anniversary. And
Mm.
every year I've been able to cut those flowers, put them in a vase, and bring them to my mom and say, here are flowers from you.
Oh, I love that so much. Are they yellow? Are daffodils yellow?
They're yellow and beautiful and bright. And love stays. We often think that death in our human finite minds is just, it's over. But I think that's the beautiful thing about loving others while we're here. It allows it to stay when we're gone.
Yeah, and you remember the relationship, and it's just a flower, but it's from your dad, and that makes it more meaningful. Okay. This is the hard part. At the end, when you brought your child into it as someone who is also going to suffer with chronic illness, and I was a little disappointed. I was like, why? Why do we have to do this? Why does this have to be true? But what you say is that you found yourself wrestling with fear and anger and the in between of guilt and grief, the doubt of all I should have done swirling around in my mama's heart, a battle that felt too big to fight. And but somewhere in the middle of all its ugliness, we have found each other. And you talk about these little memories with your child because you're doing the same things for her that you had to do for yourself with the prescriptions and the doctor visits and the driving and procedures and the tears. And it's not something that you want for your child. None of us want that for our children. But in the suffering, you are able to show her that unconditional love. So tell me about that.
Yeah, our kids, it's hard. It's just so incredibly hard to watch them go through. I think, especially pain that we have unique experience with because we know how much it hurts. It kind of goes back to that empathy thing. And so when you combine that with your mama heart and your love for them, it is it's gutting. But I think the thing that I have had to look, and I honestly, that was her diagnosis was probably 8 years ago, 6 to 8 years ago. So we've been walking that path for a while now. But as your kids grow, more things happen, more things, diagnosis happens, more struggle happens, loss happens. And I'm finding, especially with teenagers, that you cannot keep them from pain. You have to be present in it and you have to be ready to walk them through it, but they have to experience it. And then when we have the littles, what do we do? Like 24/7. No, watch out. Don't. Oh, there's the corner of the table. That is what mothering is from the start. It just, gosh, it's hard. But I think the beautiful thing, maybe the redemptive piece of it, is I didn't have that in my illness because I didn't experience it under the love of my parents. And so the good, even though the bad is really awful and stinks, is that we have this journey together and neither one of us have to walk it alone.
The last thing we're going to talk about is how suffering has encouraged you to be dependent on God. And I have said this over and over, or at least felt it, that my Christian life isn't about doing things right or knowing what I'm doing or feeling comfortable in my life or even feeling confident that I'm doing the right thing. My Christian life has just pushed me to depend on God more and more and to constantly surrender, whatever it is. And I think what you talk about throughout the book is the way your heart has surrendered and you have learned how much you need to depend on God. You say on page 34, a beautiful prayer: Lord, take my empty arms, my wreck of a body, take it all, use them for you, fill them with you, just you. You're enough for me, for always, forever enough. How do we get to a place, because this honestly, it seems impossible, but how do we get to a place where we say that God is enough?
It's a hard answer. I think it's a really hard answer. You literally have to be face planted at the feet of Jesus, I think, to really understand, especially with our first world mentality of control and we get to have everything on our own terms. And I think in many ways it paralyzes us because we have so much control in so many areas of our lives that we want the same to be true with our faith, that it is on our terms, in our control, our way. But the beautiful thing about chronic illness for me, and I often laugh and say, I must be a really hard study because God knew I would need this reminder every day, is at some point I end up, whether it's metaphorically or it is literally, flat on my face on the floor in front of Him saying, I can't do this. I have reached my capacity and I need you to take over. And I think that's what He longs from us, or longs for us to do on our own. But it really, I think, at least in my case, maybe there are some other folks out there that are like, no, I got this down. In my case, it is a daily exercise of remembering I need you. And so, as hard as that is, it is in the pit, it is in the valley, it is in the places where we literally think we are going to break into, that we realize, oh, wait, I haven't. And it's because of the grace of God.
I wonder why. I'm so curious as to why God wants to shatter us like this. Like, I'm not saying it's fun for him, but like, if our faith is that fragile, if our faith is that it almost feels like to me that our faith is meaningless because we need him so much. And I know that's not true. Our faith is not meaningless, but he really wants us to be completely stripped of all of our confidence that we can do something because he wants to do it through us and he wants us to have the pure motives. He wants us to depend on him. He wants us to let him work. And for some reason, we fight against that. I mean, I fought against that my whole life because who wants to feel weak? Who wants to feel incapable and naked? Nobody likes that feeling, but he uses the humble. And I have seen, I get that little prick in my heart where the Holy Spirit is saying like, you think you're big stuff, don't you? You think you got this. You think you're good. And I'm like, yeah, well, what's wrong with that? And he's like, you know what? I need to humble you. This is a humbling exercise. And I feel that prick and I feel that saying, you know what? I need to let this go. I'm doing this for my own selfish motives. I'm doing this to spread my name. I'm doing this because I want to. And I love the freedom that comes when I make the right decision to say, okay, I'm not going to do it then. If this is a process to humble me, I'm going to have to trust the process that this humility is going to be better for me in the long run. And this is what I need to do. And then I have to let go.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is right at the end of the book. And you say, but even in the mess and the madness, we can find a beauty greater than any spotlight or applause, a milestone we never thought we'd see, a prayer answered, or a joy made full. Each takes us back to the heart of the Father who has perfectly held us, loved us, and carried us. A Father who brings beauty from our ashes, speaks healing through our brokenness, breathes peace into our chaos, weaves strength into our weakness, brings light into our darkness, offers freedom from our shame, and gives hope rooted in the grace of forever. Even when we need help to make it to the other side, even when our weakness is displayed in all its glory, even then, he draws us close and whispers, I'm so glad you didn't give up. I want to end with that because the title of the book is Even When. And I think you did a beautiful job using your story that God gave you to say, even when you went through the suffering, God was there. He held you, He taught you, and He's proud of you for not giving up. Are you proud of yourself for not giving up?
Of course. Of course. I think even the writing process and walking through all of the things that we've been through again and the editing, I'm like, wow, this really was a lot. No wonder I am so tired. So I think that is the beauty of a life lived when you have been through those valleys and you have been through the things that knock the stuffing out of you, that you're able to say, okay, I did make it. It may have been, with my face on the floor in the dirt, late for a podcast interview, as I was for this one, but you made it. And I think there's something to be said for that. We still need to heal, we still need to grow, but sometimes survival is the biggest grace of all.
Well, thank you for pouring out of your own energy and your own struggle and your story and giving it to us vulnerably, because these are my favorite types of books to read. I want to hear the worst days. I want to hear it because I want hope for myself that I can get through my worst days. And I hope that your message and your book and your books to come will encourage others to, walk through their suffering and to learn from it and be able to, like we talked about, develop empathy and an unconditional love and a dependence on God. So, to wrap it up, tell me what you're working on now and what your family's up to and how my listeners can find you.
Well, what I am working on now is survival. We'll go back to the surviving thing. We have a senior, so our first baby is flying the nest, and we just are kind of chugging along trying to get through and enjoy it. And really, these are the years that I prayed for, you know, 10, 11, 12 years ago, to be able to see all these milestones. And I don't want to miss it. And I may be a hot mess, but it's been a real grace to know that the book is out, to know I've had plenty of people just say, Sarah, just take the time you need. But I'm even seeing inspiration come back to write more of our story. It just needs a little bit of time to marinate. You can go to my website, sarahcormany.com, or seriously, and I really mean this when I say it, send me a private message, connect with me on social media. If I am able to, I would love to just hear a piece of your story or pray for you. And I mean that with all I have in me. So,
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so, so much. It was lovely having you.
oh, the pleasure was mine.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we talked with Sara Cormany. She is the author of Even When: Experiencing God's Presence During Difficult Days. This is a very beautiful book. It's short, it's easy to read, and I think that it will encourage so many people. I would definitely recommend that you pick it up or pick it up for a friend who's struggling, because this is going to be something that encourages them as they go through their own seasons of difficult days. You can find Sara Cormany online on her website, and I will link that below. Alrighty, see you next time.